let's go ahead and get started. And really what we're talking about here are I put together some of the main components, and here it's titled The Top 7 Secrets of Highly Profitable Marketing Strategies and the 5 core systems every chiropractor should implement. And so hopefully this will clarify it. What is much more effective marketing, and what are the components of least effective marketing. And we are limited by time and money, so we do want to pay attention to where we would want to put our efforts. And so let's see here. Okay. So these are the concepts of marketing that I use to open 77 chiropractic offices in 20 states. And those offices saw over 30,000 new patients a year. And what does that really mean? Well, when you do well in practice, it does two things that most people are looking for, is a little bit of security, and it helps to create a lifestyle. So that's the benefit of having this knowledge and skill set. Now, real quickly, we'll go through the basics because I want to go into the core. Remember, there's 3 levels of business revenue production. In other words, there's only 3 ways to make money, which is exchanging your time for money, and that's seeing patients, or leveraging your money, or leveraging time. And those percentages on the right side indicate the percentage of people that became millionaires and what source they use. So the worst source is maximizing your time for money. The best source is leveraging time. But one builds on the other. So you got to know the core components to maximize your time for money, to be able to leverage your time or leverage your money and then leverage your time. You can't jump from one to the next. And there's 4 major factors in that first category, which is exchanging your time for money, and that's running a practice. And there's only 4 sources of revenue, and it's either new business, retention, overhead, or fees. And it's those ratios and how you affect those ratios which are going to determine your profit. Now, we're specifically only going to talk about one of them right now, which is new business. So we're not going to talk about retention, overhead, or fees. But out of those 4, retention is the most important, because if you don't have decent retention, you're going to spend a lot more time and money trying to attract new business. So and again, we're only referencing the new business category. So there's essentially 6 categories to attract patients as it relates to the S-curve. So you are doing one of these things. How well you are doing them depends on your knowledge and your skill level. Number 1, you're either doing nothing. Number 2, you're dependent on market forces. Number 3 is you might be using some form of publicity. Number 4, maybe some advertising, maybe some sales promotions or educational sales. So one of those things, and these words you may not be familiar with, but you are doing one of these things in your business. And hopefully it's not number 1, doing nothing. So we're going to start with the promotions on the left side of the S-curve. And essentially, if you recall, that's where the perceived need is. We're talking about the people that have the perceived need in the S-curve of marketing. So remember, on the left side is where the people have the need, and on the right side are the people that they may or may not have a need, but they're not necessarily looking. So when there's a segment of the market that does have a perceived need, they will pick based on one of these 5 factors. Now, in chiropractic, this is the order that they will pick on: referral, proximity, price, quality, and service. And it's over in every industry. Referral is always number 1 because of the trust factor. Now, this is very important. These are really basic core components, because if the number 1 place people go for business is a referral, maybe that should be your number 1 marketing system. And so this knowledge is very important to prioritize and to put your systems in place. Number 2 is proximity. And after referral and proximity, 75%. Price gets down to 25%. And typically it's proximity and price that's part of the equation. Quality and service is only 3%, because they expect licensed providers to be able to give a quality service or a quality product or service. So those are 2 factors. Now, if only 3% of the market is acting based on a service or quality factor, it doesn't make a lot of sense to use that as your messaging, unless there's some other extraneous factors. But we're just talking generally speaking. So the major considerations here for the primary marketing equation, and this is very big to marketing, is understanding that there's the need, the marketing equation ratio. In other words, when we look at a person or people, it's their perceived need versus their obstacles divided by trust that determines whether or not that they will act. In other words, they're going to buy your services, come in as a patient. Now, obviously, when we talk about need, we're talking about pain-based primary need. And again, if you've heard any of my lectures before, you know that that's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that overwhelmingly 80% of the time where we spend our time and money is to get out of present pain being it's limiting or restricting or inhibiting a primary need. That is where the highest motivating factor is, and there's no secondary comparison that's near it. Everything else is less than 5%. So that is where we want to spend our time with our message. That's in other words, our marketing message. So, and then we also want to pay attention to the obstacles. Now in chiropractic specifically, it's time or money. So it's a relationship between the need versus the time or money by how much trust is in the relationship. And of course, trust affects defenses, resistance, confidence. So these are the major factors. Now I can affect every one of these factors depending on your skill set and your knowledge. I can go in and I can affect need, I can affect obstacles, time or money, and I can affect trust. And when I have the skill set and the knowledge to do that, that's when I can access a tremendous amount of business. As a matter of fact, way more business than I can physically handle. One major component, number 4, is the degree of need is not 100%. And so many times when I'm talking with chiropractors, they're not really appreciating the segmentation of the market. In other words, most chiropractors think there's either need or no need. Either they're going to act or not act. And that's not the case. And my point being is, if you're not aware of degrees of need and you don't know how to handle them from a marketing standpoint, you're going to be very limited to only the people who have high need that are looking. That's it. And unfortunately, that's a very small number. So is there a larger segment of people that maybe have a medium to high need, but they're now they start having some obstacles? Is there another larger segment of the categories that maybe have a medium need, but their perceived obstacles are greater than their perceived need? Well, yes, there are. And as a matter of fact, those portions of the market are way greater than just going after somebody who's not considering obstacles and just has a high need and is looking for a service provider. That's a very, very small market. So the 4 methods to get in front of your target market, to the levels of effectiveness to interact with potential patients. Now, I have here at the bottom, you see introductions, active, passive referrals, leads, and cold calls, but this is taking into consideration. I still cannot violate these other factors. In other words, the gateway, the demographics, the psychographics, the geographics, the psychographic barriers, the optimal vehicle delivery, what is the unique segment message? In other words, what's specifically their primary pain you're talking about, and you offer a solution to that primary pain, and trust and need. In other words, those factors are still important, but absolutely the 4 categories where you have the highest likelihood of getting business is number 1, introductions, because of trust and need. When there's an introduction, there's the highest likelihood of trust, which means their defenses and resistances are down, confidence and trust is up, and which means they actually have the need. So introductions, marketing systems that involve introductions, are absolutely the highest potential to get new business. The second category is what's called active passive referrals. Now, a passive referral, generally 3% of the market will create a passive referral. Passive referral is essentially you're just doing what you're doing, and every now and then you'll get a referral. The national statistics are essentially 3%. I don't want to go into the specifics of that right now, but you can take that up into what's called an active referral. In other words, I can create emotional triggers with my patients to motivate them to bring in their circle of influence as patients instead of waiting for them to come in and them not coming in. So if I have the knowledge and the skill set, I can stimulate these emotional triggers and help minimize and reduce obstacles to have these particular categories of patients bring in referrals. Now, I can take that up to 20 to 25% active referrals. So that is a very worthy knowledge base and skill set to own on its own. Understanding the difference between an active and a passive referral and the emotional triggers on how to create active referrals instead of just waiting for somebody to send somebody. So leads, it shows here 15%, so you have a much lower likelihood, and cold calls are 1%. And the reason I point this out is so much of what I see with chiropractic marketing, they are constantly going after cold calls. They're constantly in cold call systems. They're putting themselves in front of the worst potential market. I see that way more often than what I should. So here's some examples of highest probability marketing. There are essentially 5. There's 5 introduction systems or potentials. Number 1, your target market's spouse. Number 2 is their child. Number 3 is their circle of influence. Now, when we say circle of influence, that's very important to understand. There's a big difference between inner and outer circle of influence and what I can do from a marketing standpoint. I cannot do the same thing with people on the outer circle of influence versus the inner. And there's one major reason. What the person is willing to do. They're willing to do more for a higher circle of influence, and they have higher knowledge base of need and higher trust. So I can apply certain marketing systems to that person that I cannot apply to somebody who is out of their circle of influence, where there's not as much trust, not as much perceived need. It's 2 totally different systems. So when I talk about circle of influence, we're talking about a best friend, a best coworker. It's typically somebody who lives under the same roof, like a family member. We're talking about really one person here, maybe 2. Besides the nuclear family, we're talking about a best friend, best coworker. That's the circle of influence. Most people have 7. So I will have a very specific marketing system, an introduction marketing system for the spouse, the child, the circle of influence, the past patients because they already know, trust, and like you on most behalves. And out of the past patients, I want to segment those past patients into my 20 percenters. The 20 percenters who have already shown what I'm going to ask them to do. They've already stayed, paid, and referred. Now, they have already shown the willingness. So I'm separating them out. I'm going to have a totally separate marketing system for them because they have already shown high trust, high confidence, low defenses, low resistance, a willingness to go outside their circle of influence to create an action. So those are very high probability target markets. So I'm going to have a system, not just one, but I'm going to have a marketing system. Those are called introductions. Those are the highest probability of getting new patients. The 20%, so I need to segment my audience. I need to know who my 20 percenters are because I'm going to talk to them differently and I'm going to ask upon them differently. We're going to deal with them. Those are marketing systems. So one of the keys, if they know this person has a problem which you can solve and they have the trust and influence of that person. Those are only the 5 types of introduction systems, and introduction systems have the highest likelihood, the lowest cost of getting business. So there should be a system for every one of these segments. There should be a marketing system in place. Now, 4 options to capture your target market. Number 1, do nothing. That's happening way too much. People just waiting for things to happen. Number 2, and when you do that, you get market forces, and market forces generally aren't good. Number 2 is publicity. Number 3 is advertising sales. Number 4 is educational sales. So we're going to talk about how these relate into the target market. And this is what is so important. When there's high need, it's a small segment of the S-curve. It's very small. And market forces, I'm going to be paying attention to market forces will also drive those people in. So it's a very small segment. Now, the medium to high needs are medium or medium to low. When you look at medium to high, that is a very large segment of people. In other words, there is a large group of people who have a problem, but there's other factors that are limiting them, such as obstacles. So they may not be looking for you, and they're probably not. They're doing something else, and or there's some obstacles that may be limiting their actions. And this is very important to understand this, because how I attack that segment from a marketing standpoint is very different than the people with high need. I need to know these differences. I need to understand and be able to segment these out. These are relative to the S-curve. Now, when there's medium to low need, that's a very large segment, and typically that's also a very large segment. Now, what I wanted to point out here that's very important, when I look at the medium and high need, what will attract those people? Well, they're not looking for you. Now, the high need people, those are the 8% of the chiropractic patients that are looking for chiropractors. So that's a small number. Now, the medium to high need, that's that right side of the S-curve where there's 92% of the people who are not looking for chiropractors. Now, remember, 25% of those people don't have a need, back pain, neck pain, or headaches. In other words, a gateway and a normal associated need. So you have this large segment of people with a medium-high need. Well, what vehicle of delivery can I help to get these people? Well, advertising. Now, will advertising increase their perceived need? Now, I'm speaking obviously in generalities, but will advertising increase a perceived need? No, advertising will not. So how can I get these people to act? I use advertising to help clear their obstacles. And so typically their obstacles are time or money or trust. More often, money. Money being the and let me just use some numbers. So if the person has on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest need, and let's say that person is a 5. So they're not looking for you. They're not in that 8% category. So your normal advertising won't get those people. But they do have back pain or neck pain, etc. So what is one way that I can try to attract that group, that segment? Lower the obstacles through advertising. That's when I would either do discounts or benefits. That would be the strategy to go after the medium-high need type of people. Now, with the medium-low type of need people, that is another large segment. So hopefully you can see the absolute largest segment of a market is not the high need people. It's the medium to high need people, or medium need people, or medium to low need people. Now the medium to low need people, that's also a large segment. What will get them? Will advertising get them? No. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, they're a 3 in their motivation to act, but their obstacles are a 5. Well, in that particular person, I'm going to need to do 2 things. I'm going to need to do educational sales, which is to increase the perceived need, maybe take it from a 3 to a 5, as well as remove or minimize the obstacles and take the obstacles from a 5 to a 3, 4 or 3 or a 2. When I do that, they act. And these are huge psychological understandings of market segmentation and how to go into masses of the market instead of waiting around for a very small segment of people to call you. So once again, a small segment of people in the high need category, market forces will take care of that, as well as advertising. The bad news, it's a small percentage in the chiropractic industry. It's 8%. The medium-high need to medium need, those people have a problem. Let's say it's a 5 or 6, but they're not looking for chiropractors. So I'm going to want to do something to minimize the obstacles to create the momentum. And then the medium to medium low, I'm going to want to not only affect their perceived need, but also their obstacles, typically of time or money. And that's called educational sales. So we have 3 totally different categories of the market on how I'm going to go after segments of the market. Now, obviously, if I know the basics of advertising, and do good advertising, and I know educational sales, I now have a very huge potential market. So how each often affects the market relative to the S curve is dependent on where the person is on the S curve. Well, number one, if you do nothing, you only get market forces. Well, those are small numbers. So you're just waiting around for the other 8% of the people, and then you divide them by the chiropractors in your geographic area. I don't know of any practices that maximize their time for money using that system. Number two, you can use publicity. Who's going to be attracted by publicity? Well, it's not, publicity is not going to affect need, but it will affect trust. Well, remember, part of the equation we're looking at is need by obstacles divided by trust. So if the need is a 5 and the obstacles are 5, but the trust comes up, will that not likely help increase the person's willingness to act? Trust will increase the person's willingness to act. Yes, it will, without affecting a need or an obstacle. So the publicity will not affect need, but it will affect trust. That's one part of the equation. Now, the advertising sales promotions, advertising will not affect need. Advertising and sales will not affect need. It will not help increase the motivation of the target market. But it will lower risk, the risk reprisal. And that's a major component. People are afraid of losing or risking their time or money. So that is a major component of this marketing formula. Now, educational sales. Educational sales will affect need if you're good at it. And remember, in educational sales, you have to take your target market through 3 psychological factors: admit, consequences, and personalization. And the consequences have to be primary pain-based. That's educational sales. So if you have the skill set and the knowledge of educational sales, you'll be able to go into this market, the right side of the S-curve, the people who are not looking for you. And you will be able to establish need, and let's say there are 3, and maybe take them to a 5, or maybe at a 5, you take them to a 7, and have the ability to take their perceived obstacles from maybe a 7 to a 5 or a 5 to a 3. And when you tilt it in that manner, in other words, when the perceived need is higher than the obstacles, people now act. And that's the equation. That's the formula we're constantly paying attention to relative to the segment of the market. So these are how publicity, advertising, or sales promotions and educational sales go into the market. So hopefully you can understand or see that the worst thing you could do is nothing. You're just going to get market forces and 8% shared by your people in your area. That's a small number. Advertising will definitely help get more of the 8% than your competition, but you will also help to bring in people who have a perceived need by lowering their obstacles. And of course, hopefully you can see educational sales is the cornucopia. That's everything. If you have the skill set and the ability to get in front of a segment of market that has a perceived need, and it doesn't matter where it's at, 1, 2, or 3, whatever, and you know how to take that up and minimize or eliminate the obstacles, you get the business. So these are the differences in marketing, and it's relative to a knowledge base and a skill set. Now, major considerations to effectiveness. Obviously, you want to pay attention to the science of the bell curve. What are the best demographics? What are the best geographics for your product or service? When you violate all these, you're significantly decreasing your likelihood of getting business. Go ahead and get in front of the wrong person that's outside of your area, that doesn't believe in chiropractic, that's on the other side of the river, and talk about something that they don't even associate with chiropractic. Make it a pleasure-based system, and you've got nothing but chaos. You've got terrible, everything I just said was absolutely terrible from a marketing standpoint. So even though the primary ratio form is important, you still have to pay attention to these factors, the science of the bell curve, the reverse engineering relative to your product or service. these are the major factors: the demographics, geographic, psychographic barriers, gateways, the motivational message, the vehicle delivery, whether there's a discount or offer, relative to effect, risk reprisal, and follow-up. So some examples: the top 5 marketing systems all chiropractors should in place. Now, you are applying one of these systems to attract them right now. You're either doing nothing, you're either doing publicity, advertising, or educational sales. Very few chiropractors that I ever come across know much, if anything, about educational sales. Some know advertising, but the vast majority of your competition doesn't know anything really about what we're talking about today. And so these are the 5 categories: why, the spouse, the child or close relative, the circle of influence, it's typically 1, past patients, and the 20%ers, those are the VIPers. Now, why? Why are those the absolute systems? In other words, you should have a system in place that regularly communicates with these people. Why? Because of trust and need. It's an introduction. You have the highest probability of getting business from these. Now, obviously, these systems are important. Those other factors we talked about, gateways, messaging, the pain, pleasure-based messaging, demographics, psychographics, all these other factors are important. But the most important core component of all marketing, need versus obstacles divided by trust. That trumps everything. That's the core of everything. So in all of my offices, I had systems. We had systems exactly what to do and say for the spouse. We had systems of exactly what to say and do for the children. We had systems of exactly what to say for the circle of influence referral and the past patient and the 20%ers. These are systems that were regularly trained and put in place that regularly produce results. And here's a little example. And I just put some rough numbers together. So if you look at a spouse, let's say you averaged 10 new patients. And let's say you were able to get, by the way, our statistics was 1 in 4. Out of every 4 spouses, we were able to get 1 as a new patient. So if you average 10, that's 2 new patients, and it didn't cost you anything. You got to remember, where are these people on the S-curve? A spouse is somewhere on that S-curve. Either it's a low 8% and they're going to be looking for somebody. They got back pain and neck pain and they're looking for a chiropractor, but that's a very small number. So on occasion, you will get a spouse without having a system or a knowledge or skill set in place. But you can change that with knowledge and skill sets. So the spouse, that's if it was 10 new patients, 1 in 4. So that's a system. The child, if you have 10 new patients, the average couple has 2.3 children. So, and again, just round these numbers off. So that's 23. If you only were able to get 20% of those children, that's 4 a month. Well, are you going to tell me that 20 kids a month or 240 plus kids a year have absolutely no problem that you can help with as a chiropractor? Is that what I'm hearing? Well, no, they're somewhere in the S-curve. By far the majority of them have a problem to some degree, but they're not looking for you. And if you don't have a system in place, and obviously the type of system is important, that's business you will not get, or you'll get based on market forces, which are very small numbers. All of these factors you can control with skill sets and knowledge and significantly boost your business. Circle of influence, we talked about that. So if you have 10 new patients there, you easily should be able to get 2 from that. That's 2 a month. Your past patients, if you had a past patient category of 1,000 patients, 2% of those people were in auto accidents every year. That's 200 or 16 a month. So those are already high trust, higher need categories. Well, what system in place is there to regularly communicate and attract those people in? If you don't have a system, you're going to get a very low number of market forces. The 20%ers, let's say 20% of your 1,000 people are 20%ers. That's 25% that are effective, or 50. And let's say they refer in, so you're looking at 4 new patients a month, roughly. That's just from your getting referrals from your 20 percenters of a patient base of 1,000. So you can plug in your numbers, whether you have a patient base of 100, 500, 1,000, 3,000, or 5,000. You can plug in your numbers and start to see some of these ratios. So the total new patients here can obviously vary from 12 to 28. And what most doctors really aren't in tune with is they can only handle 20 new patients a month at a highly effective rate. If you're pretty effective at processing patients, in other words, you have really good systems. Typically, the average doctor can only handle 30 new patients a month. Now, if you're terrible and your retention's terrible, then you're going to need a lot more new patients. But the average doctor who is very effective typically can only handle 30 new patients, and if you're not very effective, 20. And it doesn't take a whole lot to get 20 new patients when you have the knowledge and skill sets. So here's some examples of bad systems, some of the things that I see. The worst thing you can do is do nothing. Don't have a spouse system. Don't have a child system. Don't have any introduction systems at all. Matter of fact, don't have any systems at all. That's the worst thing, and I see so many chiropractors who don't have systems. And I'm talking somebody specific in place doing ABC. No system. What I do see is every now and then a one and done, trying a one and done type of marketing. Or I see these cold calls. You don't know them and they don't know you. And examples here are malls, fairs, and lectures. So you can still do malls, fairs, and lectures, but increase the trust. There's things you can do in a cold call environment to affect the trust. But most of what I see are chiropractors going after high need people in cold call systems. That is overwhelmingly what I see when I consult and talk with chiropractors. Wrong gateway. Huge paradigm shift. That's a major problem, and chiropractors, they just don't get it. You're not going to go to the dentist and be okay with him looking at your big toe. And so when you come in and they come in for back pain and you start palpating their T12 and start talking about their kidneys, which they have no perceived need, no association, you are now losing this business. You're on your way to losing business. Just like you wouldn't want the dentist to start talking about your big toe. And so I have a whole message on gateway violation. So you bring them in through gateways. That's why they're called gateways. We can educate the people that come in horizontally, but paradigm shifts will prevent them from coming in, and they'll even stop the normal business. So wrong gateways are typical. Pleasure-based messages, wellness care. That's not motivating, that's demotivating. Feel better as opposed to what's getting worse. Out of geographics. Most doctors I come across don't even know their 80% geographic radius. That's one of the very first things that we do, is so you get a clear understanding of what the patient is not willing to do. It doesn't matter what you want them to do. It's an understanding of what they want to do, and then you reverse engineering and using all that information, and that's good marketing. No incentive or call to action. In other words, you're not minimizing risk. And another one is not getting the immediate appointments or taking immediate action, because time kills deals. And I would say every 24 hours, motivation decreases 50%. So it is very important to get action. Now, the top 5 marketing mistakes, common systems, and I talk about this. Worst possible target market, cold calls, I talked about that. Wrong gateways, paradigm shifts. That's with the visceral conditions. Also, what I commonly see is the chiropractors that market, they can do everything. Too many topics, not specific. When you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to everybody, and you create confusion, and confusion gets people to pull away. Wrong motivation, pleasure, live further, better, happier, wellness care. We talked about that. Out of the geographic, psychographic barriers, no systems. These are absolutely routine. When I consult with chiropractors, they almost have all of these going on to some degree. Typical sign that a business is constantly chasing the next shiny marketing scheme. This is what I see with chiropractic businesses routinely. One or multiple of these factors. One, no marketing plan. It's rarely that I come across a chiropractor that actually has an annual marketing plan. Number 2, a system. in other words, A, B, C, and D, what you're doing and why you're doing it, and who's responsible, and you quantify it and you measure it. That's a system. No systems. C, no marketing assistant. You just can't get past doing very well without having some help. You just can't do it on your own. Being a small business owner, as you know, there's too many balls in the air. You need a marketing assistant. Number 3, no staff meetings. And I call it marketing by osmosis at the counter. That's what the chiropractors typically are good at. Between patients, standing up at the counter, and then the CA just should start to know what the doctor wants. That's called staff meeting by osmosis at the counter. And that is a terrible system. So no staff meetings. The staff meetings are everything. That tells me right away when I ask somebody 2 things. You having a staff meeting? Are you keeping stats? I never see a high producer that doesn't do both of those. And every low producer that I see doesn't do both of those. They don't do staff meetings, and they don't do, they typically don't have a staff meeting, and they don't do training, and they don't have systems. So there are natural factors that show success, that lead to success. There are natural factors that lead to failure. No benchmarks. Benchmarks, goals, however you want to say it, expectations. They do not measure results. I'm surprised how many chiropractors do not quantify and measure results, and then base their marketing and their actions on the results. And then another one is doctor motivation. And one of the worst things that happens that I see are the doctors that are doing well enough to pay their bills. In other words, they're out of survival. They're getting their primary needs taken care of, and that might be seeing 80 a week, 60, 70, 80 a week, maybe 100. But it's not enough revenue to live the lifestyle and dreams and create security for their family. That is like the warm water situation. It is a very, very, and it needs to be recognized. There's ways of dealing with it, but being absolutely ignorant about that situation and ignoring it, that's not the way to get out of it. So I typically see that doctor who's out of survival, that in other words, it kills their motivation, and they're not putting things in place to motivate them to do these things so they can live in abundance. So the doctor's 4 limiting factors. These are the 4 limiting factors that I routinely see with doctors. Number 1 is the knowledge, the difference in advertising versus sales as it relates to the S-curve. That's number 1. Number 2 is the skill set. You not only have to be aware of it, you have to own it. And there's 4 different levels of skill set, from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. And each one of those takes a different form of what I call training to get from one to the next. So it's the skill set relative to advertising, especially educational sales. That's a skill set. Number 3 is compartmentalization. Doctors are small business owners and chiropractors. They went to school to be a clinician. So all they care about is treating patients, talking to the patient. I mean, a doctor would probably love to just stay in the room and treat patients all day, not deal with anything else in the whole business. But that's not reality. And so I see huge problems with doctors not having the ability to compartmentalize, meaning they don't do staff meetings. They don't understand that there has to be a marketing session. They don't understand there has to be a statistical management session, that there's a financial category session. They don't have on their calendar compartmentalized components that are absolutely necessary to get to the next level in business. It's typical, the worst typical scenario is when I see doctors that are constantly seeing patients from 9 to 6 or 9 to 7, and then you talk to them, they go, I don't have time for staff meetings. Everybody's got the same amount of time. It's your knowledge base and your skill set and how you manage it. That's the difference. And those are the difference that make differences in quality of life. And then, of course, motivation, and I talked on motivation. But those are the 4 major factors when I do training and work with doctors that I put a tremendous amount of emphasis on to get them to the next level. And I talk a little bit about how it does that. Knowledge typically is through books, seminars, and tapes. Mentoring is the best way. Experience is the worst way. The skill set, I talked about that, the 4 stages of awareness. We talked about the compartmentalization. You have to compartmentalize your training, your staffing, your marketing. And that's why you need to do staff meetings and staff regularly scheduled with specific agendas. That's called compartmentalization. That's taking your business to another level. Motivation, not in survival. So there are ways to handle all these. So that typically results in no action, bad results, not able to penetrate the market. And here's typically what happens right here. When you don't have that knowledge and skill set with the advertising, here's the typical scenario. You're not able to penetrate the market. In other words, you're only able to get a small segment of higher need people. And when that happens, you're not able to attract the masses to your potential business. And so what it happens is sitting on the fence with an incongruent message, or it's incongruent with your needs to obstacles trust ratio. So when you don't have that, you're only going to be able to attract a very small segment of the people. So you're constantly looking for marketing schemes. So doctors who do know marketing basics do get past the first scale of business, which is maximizing their time for money. So doctors with the knowledge and the skill set to penetrate a category, they always end up with more business they can handle. And one of the other main reasons is there's little competition at the top. There's very little competition. So the doctor who does understand and have the skill set of the basics of publicity, advertising, especially educational sales, and the doctor who does do training and has systems and benchmark, that's typically the doctor that I see that is constantly doing better, and their quality of life is exceptional, and it's really them in control of their life. So what are the first core marketing systems that you should have? Well, the first core marketing systems you should go is, where do the patients go first? Well, in chiropractic, the first place they go is to their circle of influence for a referral, their spouse, etc. Honey, do you know of a good dentist, doctor, chiropractor locally? So the very first system you should have, and that's also what my advertising program is based on. My advertising is totally based on the first core system. Being in front of the past patient, whether it's with the video newsletter or other forms, and there are other forms that are even more effective to do it. Whether the doctor does it or not, that's up to him. Number two is the internet, the insurance company. That patient will go to the insurance company. So the first thing is make sure you're on the insurance companies, but also what I see is wrong information on insurance companies. So I would make sure you go on each of the major medical insurance companies and make sure all your information is correct. You'd be surprised how many times one of the first things we do is check these when we do any coaching or consulting, and that's the problem right away, or some of the problem. But that's also why we have the insurance videos. So we try to interface with them when they go to the internet to see what providers are in their backyard. And of course, the next thing they'll do is Google Places, any chiropractors in that location. That's what the advertising is based on. Who are we trying to capture? We're trying to capture the 8% that are looking and trying to get more than the competition. That's what the advertising does. In it are, though, Google, their conditions doctor, and one of the other one is pay-per-click. The pay-per-click is a very unique strategy on its own that I highly recommend. It has multiple factors. I'm not going to get into it right now. And then the last one is the office sign. Those are the 5 top reasons that patients, the 8%, will look. They will turn to one of these categories. And we don't do office signs, but we explain how what's a better office sign versus worse. But more importantly, is using a sign that will even drive them to a squeeze page, that'll drive them for follow-up communication. That we can do. So these are the top 5 places where the patients will go, the 8%ers. So there should be systems in place for this. That's what my marketing systems does. It covers the 8%. Well, those are the core systems. Now let's go into the second core marketing systems. These now are based on advertising, better advertising, and educational sales. Well, I can't control what you do or don't say. That's educational sales. So is there a method to increase your likelihood of getting a patient from a spouse? Yes, there is. Is there a method for a child? Yes, there is. Is there a better method and a system to create an active referral versus waiting for a passive referral? Yes, there is. That's called advertising and educational sales. past patients? Are there better messages and marketing systems versus not doing it at all versus terrible ones? Yes, there are. And then, of course, the 20 percenters. So these are the second core marketing systems. Now, you do have to have some knowledge about advertising and educational sales to increase the effectiveness of these. And obviously, the more knowledge you have and the more skill set you have, the higher business you get in each of these categories. This is the second core of marketing systems that I trained. This is exactly what I trained when I opened offices. The third core marketing systems, and you can see here the least is advertising, the best is educational sales. Monthly office promotions. Are there better ways of doing monthly office promotions and better systems and steps? Yes, that is a knowledge-based system also. In and out of office lectures or new patients. What's actually great about lectures is a leverage of time. You're not just a one-on-one. I can talk to 5, 10, 20, 40 people. In other words, I have a tremendous leverage of time. And what's even better than that is using the internet through webinars to leverage your time through past patients and future patients. So that's the power of lectures. Now, whether I go through a cold call or an introduction or a referral, those all will affect. But are there still systems that I need to pay attention to that increase the effectiveness of all of these relative to introductions, active passive referrals, leads, cold calls? Yes. Or is it important that I pay attention to demographics, psychographics, geographics? Yes. Is it important that I pay away to gateways, motivational factors, obstacles in my messaging? Yes. All of these will increase your likelihood of your business. And the more knowledge and skill set you have, the more you will absolutely attract and saturate your business, and you will not be able to process all the business you can attract. Cross-promotional activities. Those are very good to leverage trust through other businesses and other categories. Those are the third core marketing systems. So you have primary, secondary, and third core. And all of these should be systems, not one and done. They should A, B, C, D, E. This is how I opened 77 offices in 20 states. I did not wait around and not pay attention to demographics, psychographics, gateways, motivation. I paid attention to all those and I trained them very well. So specifically for the personal injury core marketing systems, where to go first? These are exactly past patients. Why? 2% of your past patients are in accidents and they're in a circle of influence. There's already trust. So the best strategy, one of the best strategies, is a good system to your past patients. And remember, there are better systems and there are worse systems. Number 2 is the internet, specifically with places, conditions, therapies, and doctors. We cover that. Pay-per-click, and as I said, that is a very high favorite because it incorporates multiple highly specific factors. Again, there's systems to all this. It is not ignorance. There are factors which make each one of these components way more effective versus not effective or slightly effective. Personal injury attorney advertising that leads to educational sales. Huge opportunity here because of a tremendous amount of market. But again, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with people who are in a state of unconscious incompetence and no perceived need. What does that mean? You have to do advertising to grab their attention because advertising alone will not establish need and totally minimize obstacles. It will not. So you have to use advertising to grab their attention and educational sales to affect the need and the obstacles, admit consequences and personalization relative to the obstacles. Huge opportunity here. Huge opportunity. Personal injury educational sales conferences. And that is a high trust category, high authority category, and educational sales where you can affect them in the admit consequences and personalization and minimize their obstacles. Those are absolutely the top 5 personal injury marketing systems dealing with not just market forces, dealing with advertising, and dealing with educational sales. So in conclusion, number 1, do something. Number 2, understand the S-curve of advertising strategies. Number 3, understand educational sales. and the difference between advertising and when to apply it relative to your target market. Number 4, designate a marketing assistant. You will not do very well in business on your own without a marketing. And the marketing assistant does administrative things, time-consuming administrative things. You have to have a system, A, B, C, D. You got to train it. You can't just let it go, because even when you have a system, entropy always takes over. It always weakens. Systems always go to weaken. That's the law of thermodynamics. It's the law of nature. So you have to always constantly train. That's what happens in staff meetings. That's what happens to periodic offsite conferencing, training your team. And then, of course, the bonus. The bonus is tapping into the natural human dynamics of motivation. And the last component is taking control of your destiny instead of letting market forces. In other words, just waiting around, waiting for that little measly 8% to contact you versus the competition. Strongly suggest you don't do that. That's not going to be beneficial for your lifestyle, your dreams, or your passion. So these are the marketing systems I used to open 77 chiropractic offices in 20 states, seeing over 40,000 new patients a year. And what did they provide? It provided security and lifestyle. So the potential new patients are not the problem. If we just look at back pain alone, it's the second reason people visit the medical doctor. It's the second reason people go to the hospital. It's the second leading workers' compensation injury. 2/3 of people with back pain do not seek chiropractic care. So there's a tremendous business all over the S-curve, but you have to strategically know where on the S-curve you are and what to use. Am I going to use advertising, educational sales? I have to know demographics, psychographics, geographics, gateways, motivational factors. I have to know these basics. Once I know this and have the knowledge and skill, it is an absolutely unlimited market. And that's how I was able to open one office after the next, because they were trained. These were trained in skill sets, trained in knowledge bases. So huge potential for the knowledgeable provider with a desire to impact their family lifestyles and passions. So those are the core components of maximizing your office potential and what it takes to have way more business than you can physically handle. And of course, that leads to one tremendous lifestyle. It's worth the sacrifice. So let me go ahead and finish with that, and we're going to take any questions.